Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Please subscribe with your notifications on and I'll be posting daily Teenwolf content. Channels like Jade's Corner and Teenwolf News inspired me to make content, and I've been a Teenwolf fan from the very start. Now let's get right into the video. We open on a lake and Jackson emerges from the water and he's slowly crawling to the land and he's touching the bite that Derek gave him. Now Scott is on all fours running through the woods and he jumps across a huge gap and lands. Now he's having a flashback of making out with Allison and getting pulled out of the car with a gun pointed to his face by her dad, and Allison is begging for his life and says she'll never see him again. He puts the gun away and says never again. Scott runs through traffic and jumps in through Allison's window. She tells him that they have an hour. Stiles is now seen at the hospital sleeping and talking to himself. Lydia gets up and her dad leaves the hospital room and sees Stiles sleeping on chairs and says to Melissa that he's been there all night. Then Melissa says he's been there all weekend. Allison and Scott are now making out and having a jolly good time. They both fall off the bed. Allison's mom enters the room and Allison says, "If you don't trust me enough to let me have a lock on my door, you could at least knock," and then her mom asks if she interrupted something. Her mom says she picked up her dress for the funeral tomorrow and immediately opens her closet searching for Scott. Scott is seen on the roof next to Allison's window with his clothes in hand. Her mom then looks outside the window and Scott moved before she could see him. Lydia is now on screen and she goes into the shower. The water below her becomes pitch black. She notices, then puts her hand in the water and there's a lot of hair. Then a burnt hand grabs her and Stiles hears her scream and immediately rushes into her room with Melissa and her dad. They go into the shower and there's no sign of her and Stiles sees that the window is open. Scott then hears her scream echoing. The sheriff is now at the hospital and Melissa told him that Lydia left there with no clothing and he's completely shocked by this. Stiles takes Lydia's clothes into his Jeep and gives it to Scott and he promises that he won't let anyone hurt her again. Allison then shows up and Scott asks her what she's doing there. Allison says that she doesn't care if anyone sees them together because Lydia is her best friend and she needs to find her before the other agents do. Allison then says that she saw her father and two guys leave their house like it's a hunting party. Stiles asks Allison if they'll kill Lydia if she's turning and she says she doesn't know because they won't tell her anything. All they say is, "We'll talk after Kate's funeral when the others get there." Stiles asks what others and she says she doesn't know. We cut to a cemetery where someone is digging Kate's grave and he sees something and starts looking around to see exactly what it is, and then claws appear on a headstone, then they disappear. The excavator that he's using gets knocked over and he's in the grave, then something runs across it. He gets up and sees something digging into a grave and hears a roar, then the excavator is then lifted up by Derek. Now Scott, Stiles and Allison are outside of the Hale house. That's where Scott tracked her scent to. Stiles asks if she's ever been there and Allison says not with her. Allison then says to Scott that maybe she was drawn to Derek and he says, "You mean to an alpha?" And then she asks if being a part of a pack is an instinct for wolves and Scott says they're stronger in packs. Stiles then sees a tripwire and shows it to Allison, then he pulls it and it catches Scott. Scott hears someone coming and he tells Allison and Stiles to run and he's approached by Chris. Chris then asks what he's doing out there and he says he's looking for his friend. Chris then says that he knows that Lydia is a friend of Allison and he can handle one special circumstance like Scott, but two not so much. He then walks away and Scott cuts the wire. Isaac is now being questioned by the sheriff about what happened and the sheriff asks if he's seen Lydia. He then notices that Isaac has a black eye and Isaac tells him that he got it at school from playing lacrosse, and Derek is seeing all of this from a distance. The sheriff asks if they've been getting any grave robberies and Isaac says yes, and they usually take jewelry, but the most recent one took the deceased person's liver. We cut to the school and Scott and Stiles are talking and Scott asks if Lydia ate the deceased person liver and Stiles says, "So what if she did? It's the most nutritious part of the body," and Scott says he never ate anyone's liver. Stiles then asks Scott what he was thinking about when he was turning and Scott says Allison because she was the only thing that mattered, and he also said that Lydia was with Stiles so she might be drawn to him, and Stiles says she was looking for Jackson. Jackson is now on screen looking like $1 million and a homeless man tells him that he has a nice car and Jackson gives him $1 and told him to go find another parking lot to die on. Coach is telling the lacrosse team that the police is asking for help with finding Lydia because it's going to be below 40 degrees in the night. coach says last time he was out and it was that cold he lost a testicle to exposure, and he tells the team to sign up for the search party and they'll get an automatic A in his class. Scott, Styles and Jackson are now talking, and Jackson says why should he care if Lydia wants to take a naked hike in the woods. Scott says they have a pretty good idea that she might be turning, and Jackson is acting oblivious to this. He asks into what, and Styles says a unicorn dumbass. Jackson then says they have it backwards because if Lydia is turning they'll be ones that need help, because when he was with her she left a lot of scratch marks on him, and what do they think she's gonna do with a set of real claws? Scott and Styles are now in class, and Styles says it's causing him severe mental anguish to say this, but Jackson is right. What if the next body she steals is from someone who's still alive? Danny then sees Jackson's nose bleeding and asks him if he's okay. He immediately rushes to the bathroom and more black goo is coming out of his nose. Derek pulls him out of the stall and says he's looking pale, and if something's wrong he needs to know because he's with him now. Jackson immediately takes offense to this and says he's not his little pet, and just because he gave him the bite that doesn't mean that he's part of his little wolf pack. He also says that besides that Derek doesn't show outstanding leadership qualities, and he has his own agenda that doesn't involve running around with Derek and Scott in the woods at night howling at the moon. Derek turns his face towards the mirror where black goo is visible, and Jackson asks what is it? Derek says his body is fighting the bite. Jackson asks why, and Derek backs away and says he doesn't know. Jackson then asks what does it mean while Derek disappears. Allison is now at school taking a dress out of her locker, and some guy next to her says nice dress and she says nice camera. Allison then overhears people saying that Kate is responsible for the Hale House fire and she angrily walks away. Then Scott pulls her into the classroom. Scott tells her that everything will be okay. Now everyone's at Kate's funeral and there's a bunch of cameras. The guy that was next to Allison's locker starts taking pictures of her, and Gerard takes his camera and destroys the memory card. The sheriff that grabs Scott and Styles because they basically broke into the funeral. The sheriff then gets a call about an attack on an ambulance. Styles and Scott are now in woods near the scene and they see the aftermath of the attack. Scott is now running through the woods and he sees someone's running and begins to chase them. He catches the guy and they began to fight and the guy runs off. Styles is talking to his dad and Lydia emerges from the woods and asks for a coat. Scott is still trying to catch up with the running werewolf and the trap catches the guy. Then Derek drags Scott away and begins to hide with him behind a tree. Scott says he can help him and Derek says they're already here and he should be quiet. Chris, Gerard and all of the other hunters are now on screen and Chris shocks the werewolf and he turns back to human. Chris asks who he is and what he's doing there and he says nothing. He then said that he came looking for the Alpha because he heard he was there and that's all. Then he said he didn't hurt anyone living and the guy in the ambulance wasn't alive. Gerard then says gentlemen take a look and asks Chris to tell them what they caught and Chris says it's an Omega. Gerard then says the lone wolf possibly kicked out of his own pack or the survivor of a pack that was hunted down, maybe even murdered or alone by his own choice. Scott and Derek are still watching this. Gerard takes out a sword and says an Omega rarely survives on its own, then cuts him in half. Derek then tells Scott to look at them and see what they do, and this is why Scott needs him. This is why they need each other and it's the only way to fight them. Scott then asks what are they doing and Derek says declaring war. Chris then tells Gerard that they have a code and Gerard says not when they murder my daughter. Gerard then says there's no code, not anymore. From now on these things are just bodies waiting to be cut in half. I don't care if they're wounded and weak. Or seemingly harmless begging for their life with the promise that they'll never hurt anyone, or some desperate lost soul with no idea what they're getting into. We find them. We kill them all. End. Thank you all for watching.